Well, you just mentioned, you're always trying to, reinvent yourself and learn, and, to come up with new programs for your athletes. Where do you kind of look for, inspiration and new techniques? Where do you find those? And then obviously, do you speak to each individual athlete, and kind of find out where their weaknesses is and where they thought they were kind of, if they had any weaknesses in the racing and try and improve that by, the physicality and the mental side of things? Is it involved in all the different areas?
Yeah, definitely. Like it's always a moving target with me. I think I look at, I'm very, I have, I try and be careful with this, Nige. It's just like you're like any of these things, there's some stuff that's good for business and there's some stuff that's just legit, like it works and you got to be careful. When nowadays with social media, guys are dropping using their Instagram and their I mean, all the various social platforms to raise your arms and say, hey, look at all this cool stuff I do. I try and do it once in a while too. I'm always tried to be informative, but I'm always, I'm a, the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, and, less is more sometimes. And it's not, hopefully it's not seen as a lack of advancement, but, I look at the guys that taught me, like the powerlifting guys and the basic strength coaches that still work in these big Olympic training centers. They just giggle at so much of this, you know, fancy training where people are either, I don't know, shoving a ping pong up the wrong orifice and standing on one leg, closing one eye, and playing Scrabble at the same time. Like I try and not, you know, it looks impressive on Instagram, but the reality is, you can take this right here, these barbells and these plates right here, and you can apply it literally 100 different ways. And I can apply it in a way that develops strength, that develops endurance. Um, and so the advancements, I feel like the inspiration comes from the athletes on a year-to-year basis. And I think I watch what wiggles them along and what it seems to, from feedback, work. And it's not just a physical thing, it's like a mental thing. Like I think a lot of athletes come over and I don't think I'm too far off with this, but a lot of them come in there always a bit surprised. I've got a lot of new athletes and sort of younger generation right now. It's the most I've seen in these 30 some years. Um, and they're always sort of surprised by it's not as much training, it's not as much duration, it's not as much volume as what they're used to. A lot of them have come from places where they're spending a lot of time, I think, doing a lot of spinning on bikes,
Yeah.
a lot of long workouts. I get athletes that tell me they're in the gym for 2 hours, and I'm like, wow, that's that's pretty gnarly to me. I mean, they come over to me and they go to something like 3 to 4 workouts in the gym per week for anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour, and that's pretty low to them compared to what they did. Um, I like to sort of, like I say, focus on those basics, but also look at the individual, and you can see their body type,
Yeah.
ectomorph, endomorph, and then the mesomorph, the one in between, the real athletic person. And then also listen, they do an application with me and then they fill in a questionnaire and I kind of listen to their strengths and weaknesses and I read through it. And then I also do a phone usually interview with them and I make some notes about where they're, and you're realizing that you're not just trying to help them physically, you're really working with them mentally and emotionally. And if they can see stuff in their gym training where they're seeing themselves advance, I think it changes the mindset. I think it says to them, they're not where they were, they're further ahead. And by creating check marks in their training, whether it's fitness testing or whether it's a maximum strength test once in a while for the advanced athletes, a mobility test, which is huge for me, not just for how much they can move on the bike, but what they can handle in a fall. And we're asking them to push. We're asking them to find the limits on these bikes, the absolute limit. And so we got to convince them that they are durable, that they can handle it, that they can take a fall that they can push the limits and they can survive it and come back and do it again. And so I'm kind of looking at the individuals, listening to this kind of the psyche, the psychology of them, and getting from their phone conversations and the questionnaire. I often think of it this way. It'd be like suspension. You and I have been around. And if we went to Fox or SRAM or RockShox, we're not going to convince them to completely reinvent the fork for us. Not only would it not be economical, but it would make no sense because they got so much time into that product. They know that a 40 mil tube and a stanchion and the clamps and everything, it's not just like, oh, it's the easy way out. No, they have figured out with a little bit of time that that is the right amount of compliancy, that's the right all those details, but they will individually set up the damping. So they'll say, okay, you need a little more compression. I know that like a Dakota Norton runs his forks completely different than than an Aaron Gwyn. And they can run the same fork structure, but you might dampen it slightly different. And then you valve it and then you test and you see how you can tweak it and so on. I think I think of the training that way sometimes. There's a basic structure. If somebody comes to me and they say, oh, I don't really like I don't like barbells or I don't like deadlifts. I'll be like, well, I'm going to try and convince you otherwise. Maybe you've done it wrong in the past. Maybe you've approached it wrong. Maybe something has been instructed incorrectly. Let me give you at least a shot that you can do some of these movements, and whether it's rowing, whether it's like I say, deadlifts or squats or something. But I sort of want them to do the basic stuff that I know kind of works, and then eventually you might have to tweak it for other an injury or an issue with them biomechanically. But yeah, it takes a bit of time with an individual. I was saying this to a parent yesterday. We were talking about the programs, and somebody was, making me, I guess, feel good about myself, feeding my ego. They were saying, "Oh, we know you've trained a lot of the top athletes around there, and this and that." And I said, "Yeah, but you're making me sound like I might be the best guy out there because of my track record and all these athletes." And I said, "There's a lot of good people out there, and I I don't think there is a best trainer.
Mhm.
I really don't believe there's a best coach. I don't believe there's a best bike. I don't believe there's anything." It's really hard to say that because an example would be, um, you know, uh, a restaurant. Supposedly Morton's Steakhouse or something in Vancouver is one of the best steakhouses, best restaurants in the world. Well, might beat all these awards, but my wife's a vegan, and I guarantee you she don't like that restaurant.
Yeah.
So, everybody's different. So I just say the same thing with athletes. I'm like, hey, um, if you're interested, you got drawn to me because you heard big riders' names like Aaron Gwyn and Richie Rude and Stevie Smith, and I got, cool helmets sitting in my place for promotion, but let's have a chat and see if we're on the same page. See if what I'm suggesting and the way I work, if that works for you. It may not work for you. You might be the kind of person that needs to, go to CrossFit, work in a group, get pushed a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe some people, need one-on-one trainers on a day-to-day basis. I don't work that way. And I don't look at things like that's the wrong way, this is the right way. I'm too old for that shit. I think that it's just this is the way it works for me. And so this time of year, I spend a bit more time. What has evolved more than anything for me is the time it takes to get to know the athlete. Like, make the time for a phone call, make the time for a WhatsApp or a Skype, and
Yeah.
get to know and maybe even chat, even sometimes with the family, with the parents.
Yeah.
See what their household is like, see what kind of environment you can introduce. This is what I make. This is what's probably evolved. And number two, I got a really great guy, this guy, Addison, I told you. This incredible guy, incredible. He's a younger, better looking, stronger version of me. All the above.
Impossible.
Yeah, it's all we need to do. That was easy to find. So he's come from a incredible pedigree. He went overseas, went to Europe, raced road cycles, went to the pro level, uh, you know, turned himself into a 130-pound road cyclist in the back of a car and ate cans of tuna and all that kind of thing. Didn't get all the way, came home and entered into CrossFit and ended up becoming like a regional and national champion in CrossFit. And went to the opposite side, went from this really good endurance cardio machine to this real powerhouse strength guy. And had a background with moto with his brother. They grew up around the Dungies, Ryan Dungey, and so on. And he came to me like 6 or 7 years ago and was like, "Hey, I'd be interested in being involved in PerformX." So I used an old um, method that Rob Scott told me one time, Rob. And, Rob told me, I said, man, I went to Ritalik mountain biking with him once and we got kind of drunk in the bar one night, but enough that we were still could have good conversation. I said, man, I know you're a sharp dude. Like I know you're pretty wise, and I know you got a cool background with skateboarding and all these things you really boxes you check. But like, how did you build the syndicate to be such a powerhouse, like as a race team? And I watched the program and the people. He's like, dude, it's all about the people. It's all about the personality. It's the bike, the gear. He's like, you got to build the people. And he's like, if it's so true, he said, like, you hear stories about me. I require the athletes, whether it's Cedric in the past or Menard or Loris Vergier, any of these, he's like, they got to come and they got to hang with me. They got to come to the house. They got to spend some time. And it's not about whether I think they live up to my standards or the Santa Cruz standards or whatever. It's just I want to see if they feel like they're at home, whether
Yeah,
they feel like they can gel with the program. And to me, that's when you get the most out of people is when um you're not trying to sell them on something. It's just very honest and it's very and I think for me that's the thing I'm most focused on. I get athletes and young ones, and they get excited and they go to the website and they see Richie Rude on there and they see Aaron Gwynn and and they hear of these big riders and the Finn Isles
yeah,
but I just tell them like, I know, just make your own decision. Don't based on that because I might just be a good salesman, like uh talk, get to know there's a lot of great guys out there who are
yeah,
doing this job as well. And that's probably the biggest part that is evolved for me with the athletes. And I love it. I mean, I sit here and it's like my books are almost all psychology. Like, I'm into this really good book right now. It's called, Think Fast, Think Slow. And it's so relative to mountain biking and decision making. And, it's not just deep psychology. Some of it's just really fun. And it's like, this is an incredible book with this Canadian astronaut who
right,
shouldn't have made it as an astronaut. He was not that incredible. He wasn't that incredibly talented.
right,
Definitely a book I always suggest. But he talked about how he used a strategy to become one of the most influential, successful astronauts of all time. Like he's been to the International Space Station more than almost any other astronaut. And he doesn't check any incredible boxes. He laughs about it. He says all these guys at NASA were always stronger, bigger, smarter. And yet he's been one of the most successful. And it seems like it's surrounding himself with good people, attitude, and yeah. So it's I kind of I get out there and look at the science, the real dry, boring shit, how to
yeah,
make the knee, how to make the knee better for mountain biking, and and at the same time, I'm looking at things that take vibration out of the bike, these counter shock group,
yeah,
so I'm over here. This is my latest stuff I'm researching how to make the bike work better so that the athlete doesn't even actually have to physically work as hard. Plus, I'm looking at how to make the athlete stronger, more efficient. And then over here, it's like the brain, the psychology, and then, reflex tools, you know, how much nutrition do we really need, protein to see whether we're effectively. So if I just look at my table right now, it's pretty much just the latest things I'm working on and trying to understand. without getting caught up in too much of the fads, the gimmicks. I hate to say it, but
Yeah.
yeah.